Yes, I'm not from Memcached, but I think most of you have seen me before. It's good to see all your faces again. I noticed there was another healthy attendance of first timers again, so welcome to everyone there. For those who are new or haven't seen me before, my name's Sean Newman. I look after product management for Carrero Network Security. You may have come past our booth outside and grabbed one of our great VR headsets or put your name in for the draw on our Lego Saturn V rocket. And if you haven't, come and do that later. And actually, probably more importantly, we're sponsoring the beer later, so have a free beer on us tonight. And we're very pleased to be able to do that. Now, for the people who've seen me before up here, you realise that typically what I do is come and try and give you some update on what's the latest happenings in the DDoS threat landscape. What have the attackers been up to? What have they been innovating? So I was kind of sweating on this a bit, really. I got to kind of middle of February and I'm thinking, well, there's not a lot going on, really. I'm wondering what's my next theme going to be? How am I going to find something that's kind of interesting at the sort of level that you guys are going to be interested to understand? And then right on cue, brand new attack vector appeared. So I was like, phew, great. Now I've got something hopefully useful and interesting, and you can tell me later whether it was interesting or not to talk about. We often talk about it in terms of this timeline. I'm sure many of you are probably bored with seeing it, but it's always useful just to indicate the kind of growing firepower, I guess, that the bad guys typically find. The attacks from a DDoS perspective that hit the headlines, it's always the next biggest attack compared to the previous biggest attack. It's not necessarily a great indicator of what the DDoS landscape looks like, but it is an indicator of the growing sort of capabilities and sophistication that the attackers have. So for the keen-eyed amongst you may recognise that Memcached logo on the right-hand side there. And this is kind of the first time where we've really seen sustained DDoS attacks get into the sort of terabit plus era. So I wanted to sort of spend a bit of time and help you kind of understand what that's about. I guess the previous 2-3 sessions that I've done, I've talked a lot about IoT botnets, how they've kind of got increasingly sophisticated in the way they exploit the IoT devices or the attacks that they deliver. But you'll be pleased to know this has nothing to do with IoT. It effectively is a botnet still, but it has nothing to do with IoT, so we won't be talking about that. So I'll just park that there. The Memcached attack effectively relies on this memory caching system that exists in pretty much all Linux distributions. Many of you may be very familiar with it. Anyway, it's often used in Linux environments to speed up data-driven websites or anything else that kind of replays the same sort of data regularly. And the interesting thing is it's a default instantiation in most Linux distributions. And it's enabled on port 112.1.1 for both TCP and for this specific attack, crucially, it's enabled on UDP. It doesn't have any authentication. It's really designed just to obviously be used within a local internet, within a local network, not exposed to the internet. So there's no authentication required to use it. As I said, it's a standard component of pretty much all Linux distributions, CentOS, Ubuntu, etc. And interestingly, and we've seen this, once we've seen the attack and looked at certainly a lot of our hosting customers, most hosting customers that are offering Linux hosted servers pretty much had this Memcached system open and running and exposed to the internet. Now that's changing, and a bit more about that later. But it's pretty much everybody who's doing Linux hosting or any kind of exposed Linux servers to the internet effectively had this out there and available to be used. The interesting thing is here about the use of UDP. If it was no UDP exposed, you can't do the reflection attack. And it's been there for over 10 years, which is the other interesting thing. You think, well, it's been around that long. Why now? What changed? What was different? Well, as usual, friendly white hat comes along who's been doing some research and discovers this potential exploit and wants to raise everyone's awareness to it so that you can do something about it. And if you actually go and look at the session, it was actually done at this Power Community Conference back in, I think it was the end of end of October in 2017. So not that long ago. And I've got the URL there. You can go and look at it. I think it's, it's a pretty reasonable bit of work that the researcher had done. But of course, the appealing thing for the attackers here is the potential amplification factor. If anyone knows anything about DDoS attacks, the most sort of common way before the IoT botnets came along and the mass scale of individual devices all sending some traffic is to use amplification. So common things that have been used like DNS gets you about 55 times amplification. Things like NTP at the bottom, which was really common, but kind of got locked down a bit over the last year or so with some patches. That's in the hundreds. If you look at the potential here with Memcached, it's in the thousands, potentially tens of thousands. And of course, within a quarter of friendly white hats saying, look at this potential exploit, we start to see the attacks coming through. And I'm sure everybody saw the attack on GitHub in the news. 28th of February, 1.35 terabit attack. Took GitHub down for about 10 minutes while their CDN provider, Akamai, got their act into gear, figured out what the attack was doing, figured out how to block it, and pretty much mitigated most of it, but only after that 10-minute gap. And if you listen to our story a lot, one of the things that we kind of often say is the legacy approaches to DDoS are often quite manual and involve these sort of delays. Now maybe GitHub can cope with 10 minutes offline, but other organisations, if you're providing services, you can't be offline for 10 minutes, let alone minutes. So that's something interesting to think about. And within a few hours of that, we were also seeing attacks on our customers. And then there was another even larger attack reported but unsubstantiated by Arbor Networks, 1.7 terabits. So it just kind of shows the scale of attacks that you can get with this Memcached vulnerability and the size of the amplification factor that it came with. Now, the reason it's easy to exploit, I said, it's all these Memcached servers all openly exposed on the internet. Port 11211 gives you simple telnet access, no authentication. And if you do a quick Google search, you can quickly find out what the command structure is for Memcached and figure out how to use it. So if you do this stats items command, that gives you effectively a lookup of what is actually in any particular running instance of this Memcached. So if, hopefully you can all see those couple of screenshots. So actually, as soon as we started to see attacks on our customers, we have visibility into what those attacks are, where the sources are. And of course, if it's a spoofed attack, it's like every source address that's going to a destination as part of that attack is going to be one of these Memcached servers. So it's easy for us to then go, okay, that's an open Memcached server. You can use that source address and go and telnet to it. And that's effectively what we did here. So if you look at the left-hand one, we've gone in there and we've done this stats items. And if anyone knows anything about Memcached, effectively it's divided into slabs, which are kind of slabs of cache entries. And as the number goes up, the slabs get bigger. The largest one is typically on slab 42, and that's a 10 gigabyte slab divided up into 1 megabyte entries. So the biggest entry you can put in the cache is 1 megabyte. So the attacker's going to put the biggest thing in they can, because that's going to give them the best firepower. So this is actually us, hooking into one of these Memcached instances that was in an attack. And you can see we've done this stats item. I don't have a pointer on here. But if you look at the second line down, it's like item 42, number 1. So that means slab 42 has 1 entry. When we actually look at it, so at the bottom there's item A command, lo and behold, 999,994 bytes, just under the maximum size. So, okay, that's quite interesting. So now we say, okay, what does that look like? So if we do a get on that entry, and you see basically the A, where it says item A, so the A is actually the key that's associated with the cache entry. You do a get A, and you see on the right-hand side, that's the terminal screen basically filling up with the contents of that slab entry. What you see actually in this instance, and we're not sure whether this is kind of just a joke or not, and I think there was numerous reports in the press that this was potentially a ransom demand, because if you look at the text in here, it's saying pay 1 BTC, 1 Bitcoin, and then it's got effectively a load of random characters, which is effectively going to be the account, and that just repeats, and that's what fills up the whole of this cache entry. So maybe I was expecting that someone might see that and actually pay it, but I don't think so, because I don't think people would necessarily go and analyse that. But interesting to see. So how do they actually do it? So what do they do? How do they weaponize that? That's the vulnerability. So basically the attacker goes, great, there's all these exposed memcache servers on the internet. I'm going to do a scan. So basically just scan the internet, scan through all the IP ranges, looking for a response on that port. And for every one you get a response on, you add it to your list. Okay, great, that's a potential recruit for my botnet. And thinking back to the size of these attacks, terabit attack, we kind of, on average, we've looked at some of these and we've kind of found on average they have about 100 megabit per second bandwidth that you can get out of one of these caching systems. So if you're going to do a terabit attack, you've got to find 10,000 of these. If you want to do a 2 terabit attack, you've got to find 20,000 of these servers. But there's plenty out there, so that is possible. You've just got to kind of create a pretty large list. Once you've got your list, you've effectively got to stage the attack. So you've got to load all of these memcache servers with your payload. So it might be your 999,994 bytes of pay 1 Bitcoin. Could be junk. Doesn't matter. It's just got to be a file that's going to be the biggest file you can put in there. And you've got to go around each of those 10,000 or 20,000 servers and load in that 1 megabyte file. So that's obviously it's a non-trivial exercise. So even if, I don't know, maybe the attacker's got a 100 megabit connection from their PC, that's still going to take them a good 10 or 20 minutes probably to go to each of those servers and pre-stage that file. So that's a non-trivial exercise. But it doesn't matter, because at this point all they're doing is staging it. They've found the responding servers, they put the file in. It's pretty unlikely that anybody's going to spot someone doing this. It's a pretty kind of low-key exercise at this point. So now they have all these servers all lined up, ready to go. They just need to set off the attack. So they need to know who it is they're going to attack and decide when they're going to do it. So they then start sending this get a message, the one that I showed in the previous screen. They start sending that, but with the source spoofed to be the target. And because these messages are really small, it took them tens of minutes to stage the attack. The get messages are really small. So we actually think maybe within a couple of seconds they can actually get to the point where they can go around all of the 10,000 and actually kick them off. And what they can actually do is they don't just send a get a, they can actually send a get a, which still means it's still a very small packet that they're sending, but they can get each of those memcached servers to stream multiple copies of that 1 megabit file, and they just work their way around each of those servers sending that get command, and then they just cycle around. As long as they keep cycling around, each one of these 10,000 servers or 20,000 servers is just continually sending that 1 megabit file. And that's where the multiplication comes in. So you've got 100 megabits per second times by your 10,000 servers, all targeting this one particular destination. That's where you get your terabit per second from. Now, interestingly, although you effectively want to have a DDoS protection solution in place because you're instantly going to get hit with this flood of traffic, it is actually possible to neutralize the attack yourself. As long as you've got something that's capturing these source addresses for you, you can effectively turn the attack on its head. Because when you did your Google search to find out these commands for running memcached, you actually find that there's a command in there called flush all. And the flush all command is, I'm sure you realise, it basically flushes all the entries from that cache, not just the one that's set up to attack you, but it will flush all of them, but it will instantly neutralise the attack from that memcached instance. So if you can now go to each of those memcached instances, which you can do pretty quickly, it's the same as the attacker sending his get A's, so you can probably go round them all in a few seconds. We just say flush all, flush all, flush all, flush all. Now the attacker's got a whole load of empty caches that he's trying to send his spoofed get command to, and he's now got to spend another 10 or 20 minutes to reload the payload for them to be effective. So basically you've just completely quenched his attack. It's almost like the reverse of the countermeasure is almost the reverse of the amplification factor. Your very small packet saying flush all against his time that he's got to spend reloading those 1 megabyte files. So that's great news. So as long as you've got something that's identifying the source addresses, you can get rid of this huge flood of traffic as well as having blocked it from yourself. At the end of the day, that traffic is all still coming towards you across the internet. If you can go to all these Memcached servers and hit them with this command, you're effectively stopping the attack. It's easy to do, it's instantaneous. For each one you do, it doesn't create any collateral damage. You're not actually destroying any data because the cache is just a cache, it's not a source of data, it's just a way of speeding up data access. Now, just to protect ourselves, we'd say, maybe you want to check any legal implications, but I think anyone who's had their Memcached hijacked to be attacking someone is probably going to be happy that you found a way of stopping it rather than coming after you for wiping their cache out, but I'll let you decide that. And it's pretty trivial to do. You can make this automated countermeasure pretty easy. You can see Python script here. You send this command, the 010001 is just effectively like the command header, and then you send the command, and you pipe that to all of the source addresses that are effectively coming your way. And effectively, it's as simple as that to kill the attack. Now, of course, at the same time, it's one of these things, once the cat's out of the bag, everyone figures out what's going on. All the hosting providers, hopefully a lot of you have been in the same boat, you go, okay, we can do something about this. So the easiest thing is either block your Memcached being exposed to the internet at all, or you just block the UDP side, because it needs the UDP access to be a reflection. Now, if you still leave the TCP part open, people can effectively still look at data on your network, which is an interesting concept as far as data privacy is concerned, but the main thing is to, from the attack perspective, stop the UDP side, because then there's no reflections. So I don't know if anybody uses Showdown, which is a way of looking at, rather than using Google to look for URLs, you use Showdown to look for devices on the internet, and it will show you all the devices that match a certain criteria. So I can say, Showdown, show me all the devices that are exposing port 11211. If you look back in October when the POC was done, there was nearly 120,000 of them that you could readily find. Well, now it's already down to 59,000, and actually if you look at a lot of those in detail, you find a lot of those have had the UDP side locked down. So people are getting awareness. So it's not easy now for the attackers to do a 1.4 terabit attack, but they can still use this mechanism to do smaller attacks. And if you look at our message about what the broader DDoS threat landscape looks like, most attacks are a few gigabits or less and 5 or 10 minutes long. So there's still plenty of scope for them to use this mechanism as a good DDoS attack method. At the same time, I'm getting close to the end now. So the authors of Memcached, actually even the day before, if you looked at the date on here, the day before the attack on GitHub, they'd already started to see smaller attacks build up, and they'd figured out what was going on. And they'd already released effectively an update to Memcached that effectively disabled the UDP side by default, which, that's good, but obviously that takes time to ripple through. All those instantiations of Linux out there, you've got to get to the point where you've upgraded to a version that includes this before that happens. But at least they've kind of hopefully stop that happening at some point in the future. That will kind of tend down to zero. So my last slide, as I said, this doesn't mean that that DDoS isn't increasing or it's only large attacks that are increasing. We're still seeing, aside of these larger attacks, I think in our threat report that we're working on now, we had 50% more attacks seen across our customer base than our previous threat report 6 months ago. So looking at these smaller attacks across the whole kind of size and duration of attacks, still massively on the increase. It's no surprise that you get these sort of new threat vectors appear, because even if it wasn't a white hat, the attackers are always innovating and looking for new mechanisms. You can't just rely on the traditional protection. You saw that GitHub was offline for 10 minutes. So you need something that's a bit faster, more automated, something that's looking at the traffic all the time, not relying on out-of-band monitoring. And for you guys, just see this as it definitely is an opportunity for you to not just protect your networks, but also deploy these systems, deploy these DDoS protection solutions, and be able to offer that as a service to your customers that can effectively become an incremental revenue stream. And that's everything I had this time. So if anybody's got any questions, happy to take them now, or you can come and see us at the booth or over a beer later. And thank you for your attention. Thanks.
Any questions for Sean? I might turn myself off. Sorry. Any questions for Sean? One at the back.
Hello, it's David from Akamai here. Slightly defending my employer, given some of the comments. My question is, what methods do you have to deal with the way other providers send you traffic? Under an attack like this, obviously, you get sent an awful lot of traffic. It comes over internet links, and you have to get the way people like Amazon and other hosting providers to send you that traffic to change before you can realistically filter it. So what's the technology approach you have that means you don't need to do that?
Not quite sure I understand the question, but our solutions typically deployed at probably over half our customers are service or hosting providers, and they deploy our technology on their networks to create a scalable defense against such attacks. Okay,
maybe we need to look at a diagram offline.
Yeah, later. Sure. Yeah, happy. Yeah, I wasn't trying to diss Akamai, so apologies if that came across wrong.
You were very successful at it. Even,
was I?
Well, that's how I read it.
Well, they mitigated the attack.
Your solution is a box, or is it a service?
So our solution is appliance-based. Right, okay. I said, typically we sell it to providers to put on transit links to give you a scaled defense against attacks of all sizes. Okay. That's automatic, the mitigation.
Any other questions? No, thank you very much, Sean.
Thanks. Okay, thanks.